You all obviously played Cade Klubnik as last year, kind of his breakout game, so to speak. Had his ups and downs this year.
I'm sorry, who did you ask about?
Cade Klubnik.
Clemson QB.
Okay. I thought you were starting. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. He's had his ups and downs this year. What have you kind of, from film or whatever, kind of seen from him so far this year?
Yeah, he's a really talented quarterback. Obviously, he came into the game last year in the championship game, to your point. Was really our first experience with him. But very talented, very athletic. I think he can do a lot of both, right? He can throw the football when he's hot and he's accurate. He's really, really good. On the perimeter with his feet, he's impressive. He can get out on the perimeter, the run quarterback draw with him. They'll use him in a design quarterback run game, particularly when they get down to the red zone. But I think he's really talented, and I think that they've done a better job here lately of protecting. They've done a better job of giving him time to throw, and they've moved him around some and given him an opportunity to kind of get on the edge and be productive out there. But the last 2 weeks, you can see that there's a definite means to the madness with what they're trying to do. They're intent on running the football, and they're intent on having a controlled passing game, and he's been really, really effective.
The last few ACC opponents have had a lot of success in the fourth quarter, racking up yards, points, first downs, etc. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, going back and looking at Saturday, we were very pleased with the first three quarters, to be honest with you. I think they had 142 total yards in the first three quarters. And then it was disappointing because of the three drives, that we gave up in the fourth quarter. And they're really attributed to a couple things. Number one, there were some explosive passes on that first 70-yard drive was the one that kind of started everything out. We gave up, we weren't great in pass execution and coverage. Probably could have done some things better in the rush as well. And in some of those cases, they made good plays. They made plays themselves, right? But it was really a lack of execution and at times a lack of tackling. And they kind of stacked those 2 or 3 passes on top of each other, and then they hit us with a big run. So we're looking close at it and really trying to figure out what we can do better. Putting ourselves in the situation to be more productive at that time in the game, because obviously Saturday was not. We got to overtime, and the first overtime was better, and then we were able to win at the end. But still, too many yards, too many explosive plays, and we're still looking at that because we have to find a way in the fourth quarter to play better football in these games.
And Max said he thought maybe defense a little bit tired, and he said they've got to find a way to get Power and Cedric some rest during the course of the game. How hard is it to pull those guys off the field?
When they're two major staples of your defense, it's hard. We talked about it ad nauseum on how we can do it. There's a couple of games where we have. We didn't feel like we could do it Saturday night, but we're gonna need to try to find a way to get that done. It's really hard when those two guys are just there. The middle of your defense is the nuts and bolts of the defense, and so not only just them production-wise as players, but also the guys that control everything. So the next option is really young guys, which we think are talented guys, and you're just going to have to put them in there.
Gene, I hear you when you say lack of execution, lack of tackling. Does fatigue show up in those areas when you're lacking execution and tackling?
I'm sure that the factor could be part of the equation. You hate to use that as the excuse, right? I just don't like that. But in critical moments and in critical times, we have to be more productive. There's no reason why we can play really, really good for 3 quarters. I think through 3 quarters, and our number one goal going into that game was stopping the run. We knew what was going to happen, was what their game plan was going to be, and through 3 quarters, I think they might have had 80 yards rushing.
83, I think it was.
Somewhere in that ballpark. So, it's not that we can't do it because we've been doing it the entire game. We just have to find a way to be able to execute it at a better and much higher level when games like that are on the line. And, and sudden change, right? They had a onside kick, right after we gave up the long drive, and we had to come back and stop them again, and we weren't able to do it. Same reasons, right? Execution, tackling, things of that nature, but it doesn't matter how many times you get called on during those moments, you have to come up with stops. And so we weren't able to do that until the very end, Saturday night. So execution, tackling, better calls, better coaching, all those things. At that point in time, is fatigue part of the equation? I think there's certain positions where we don't have a lot of options. So those guys are playing a ton of plays. There's other positions where we do have options. So it's probably a mix of this.
Duke was behind going into the fourth quarter, and you guys were actually up 12 at one point. Did they increase their tempo a little bit? And is that maybe a consistent theme, dealing with some tempo?
We had a really good tempo plan, and they started it early, and we didn't feel like that was an issue. And then they started to really slow the game down, is what they did. But in the fourth quarter, when they got behind by 12, that one first drive was tempo related. That didn't affect us, though. We were where we needed to be. We just needed to execute at a higher level.
Gene, you changed gears just a little bit. You started your college coaching career at Clemson as a GA there in the late 80s. Just, for a young man from Florida and moving to Clemson, South Carolina, just what was that like, and how much did that kind of influence the way your career would go?
Well, it was a great experience for me. I started out as a high school coach, and then I was lucky enough to, get offered a job there as a graduate assistant, which really was my first college introduction coaching-wise, right? So it was a great 2-year experience. We had 2 very good back-to-back football teams. Coach Danny Ford, gave me the opportunity to start there with him, and we had a lot of success. I learned a ton of football. I got my master's degree actually from there, and so it was a huge part of my life, and it was a huge part of me starting out in this career. And again, wasn't sure where it would go. I knew I wanted to coach. Not sure what the whole college coaching scenario would look like for me, but it was a great start for me, and it really got me interested and passionate about staying in college football and doing this for a living. So great times, great people, a great 2-year experience, and I wouldn't do it any different.
You played UNC twice, too. That was right when Matt was just starting here. What do you remember? Do you remember those games?
Yeah, I remember, I do. One was here and one was there, and I remember UNC was just coming on and Mac was trying to get the program started, but we always felt like playing UNC was going to be a struggle. We thought this was a great football, potentially a great football scenario here. We knew Mac was going to get it rolling. I think the second year they played us much tougher than the first year, if I remember correctly. But we knew we knew where it was going, and we never ever took this game lightly because we knew how good and the potential in this place for sure.
Gene, what was your assessment? Sorry to bring you back from memory road. What was your assessment of 4th and 7? You dialed up the all-out blitz, or I guess it looked like it to us, and then they hit you for the touchdown. Was that a perfect play call, given that you guys are bringing everybody, or just how did you assess what happened?
Well, that's a tough one. Yes, it was 4th and 7, and we did. We brought everybody we could bring. They isolated a guy, and they made a play. And sometimes that happens. You can look back and say, could we have played it a little different? Could we have done it a little different? Maybe so. Maybe going back and looking at it, maybe adjusted some technique on that particular play. But I felt like at the time, and I still feel like it today, it was the right call. And again, it goes back to execution of those calls, right? And so sometimes, opponents are going to out-execute you in those moments. You hope that they don't, but in that particular case, we did what we thought was the right thing, and they made a play, and we did it.
When you're looking to get more guys in from all the camp, you're just subbing it out. Obviously, on the defensive front, you can kind of rotate those guys up within a drive, within a possession. For a linebacker or a cornerback kind of guy, is that something you have to predetermine before a drive starts, where you start those guys out and kind of ride them out through the possession, or is that something you can interchange throughout a drive?
I think it depends on the individual and what you're asking them to do and what we feel comfortable with them doing based on what they, production-wise, have done in practice and what they feel comfortable with. And it happens a lot of different ways. Sometimes you can say, oh, look, third series, provided the ball's not inside the 20-yard line, we're going to put these guys in and let them play. You can start out and say, hey, let's wait and let's see, what the flow of the game is. And your intention is to try to get them in the first 3 series. And then sometimes when you put them in, you say, look, we're going to get them in. This is what we're going to run with them in there. Sometimes, depending on the position, I know you talked about linebacker, but this is true whether it's a corner or a safety or a linebacker or whatnot. Sometimes there'll be a limited menu of what you can call when guys are in there. Now, you don't like to do that, but again, you have to be able to call what those guys can, execute and feel comfortable executing, because offenses give you so much stuff these days right now that you have to adjust to. So it's really it varies with the individual, but there is a means to the madness when you're trying to sub guys at critical positions right now. Not that every position isn't critical, but when you're a DB now, that's a whole lot different than substitute for a nose guard. So you just have to be very judicious on how you move forward with that.
Gene, I know Jeremiah asked you about Cade Klubnik to get us started here, but in an overall sense, from the Clemson team you played in Charlotte last year in the championship game to the Clemson team that's 10 games in this year, just what would be how you would compare and contrast or analyze what you're running into on Saturday versus the offense you saw last December?
It's very similar. Their kryptonite has been turnovers. It's just that simple, right? And we say it all the time that you look at games where you're either in games or out of games, you can normally look to turnovers. And if you look to, when they've had a loss, you can usually point back to the turnover game. Whether it's a turnover in the red zone going in, which has happened several times, but just turnovers in general, that has been their kryptonite. And when they don't turn the ball over, they're extremely potent. They're running the ball really physical. They have made a concerted effort to run the football and really get downhill in the run game. You can tell that in the last 2 weeks. They did it against Notre Dame. They did it against Georgia Tech. And then again, when you're not turning the ball over and you're protecting the quarterback, Cade's, he's really good. He's really effective. He's a very talented guy. So minus the turnovers, you're really looking at a whole different outcome for that football team. I mean, honestly, because they're really good on defense. So in comparison to last year, I think they're very similar. They do a lot of the same things. I think you're just looking at a quarterback that's more comfortable, obviously, than at that point last year, right? They're very talented on the perimeter. They've got young guys at wide receiver that have really, really come on and made a difference. So they've got talent everywhere. They've got some really good receivers. Their tight end is special. He's a really, really good player. He's their second highest targeted guy. So he's got weapons to go to, and they're running the football well, and they're running the football better. So I think they're, offensively, they're really, really good, one of the best in our league, if they're not turning the ball over. And that's got to be our deal Saturday, right? We have to try to get some turnovers and get the ball back to our offense. But when they're not, they're extremely potent offense.
And it seems like you can't say it over time that they're improved.
100%. They've played their best football now, offensively. They've played their best football the last 2 weeks. And they're physical, and they're downhill, and there's concerted effort to run the football. Like I said, he's got weapons outside. So as long as they're not turning the ball over, they score points.
Got time for one more. Unless we're good.
Were you the head coach when at Auburn when you guys went in there and lost, and it was the game after where the Dabo was yelling to the reporter about how Clemson football is going to be different and that kind of thing? Was that your Auburn team that went in there?
I don't know the part about Dabo.
It was pretty.
If you're talking about 2011, yes, that was.
Yeah. What do you remember about him back then, and just kind of how he's built that program into what it is?
Yeah, I've known Dabo for a while. He's a great guy. ton of respect for him. Really amazing job of what he's done there. It is so hard to win consistently. It is so hard to win national championships. People have no idea how hard championships are to win. You know, everybody throws that word out really loosely, but when you've been involved in those and you realize everything that goes into that, they're really hard. And he's done an amazing job there building the program, and he's done an amazing job winning. And so there's nothing you can say, you know, contrary to that. He's great at what he does. They recruit great. They play well. They play great, and he's done a fantastic job there for sure.
All right, thanks, Chief.
All right, guys. Thanks.